The Boston Globe Spotlight team is out with its latest series, a 7-part dive into what it's calling its hardest question. Is Boston's reputation as a racist city still deserved? The series kicked off on Sunday with a dramatic front-page story labeled Boston, Racism, Image, Reality. In it, they highlighted a national survey commissioned by the Globe, which found Boston was by far ranked as the least welcoming to people of color among 8 major cities. According to the latest census, Boston's metro area is 73% white, far whiter than any of the other 10 largest metro areas in the country, and only 7% of Boston area residents are black. The main takeaway overall, according to the article, here in Boston, a city known as a liberal bastion, we have deluded ourselves into believing we've made more progress than we have. Boston's complacency with the status quo hobbles the city's future. Joining me now are Adrian Walker, a Boston Globe columnist and part of the team that put together this Spotlight series, Tanisha Sullivan, president of the NAACP's Boston branch, and Boston City Councilor Tito Jackson, who recently challenged Mayor Marty Walsh for the top job. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Councilor, let me start with you. When I first learned that the Globe was doing this series, the first thing I thought of was, and Tito Jackson must be so ticked that this is coming out now, after the election. Were you frustrated by the timing here?
Well, I think the timing is off. I think these are issues that we should have been discussing throughout the whole time that we were in the election cycle. And it's not about the individuals in the election cycle, but I think these issues are what we were trying to discuss. The $8 median income
net worth
versus the $247,500 for white families. January 12th, that was actually in my speech. And so these critical disparities are things that we should have been discussing for the whole time. And I do believe that the Boston media blew it when it came to covering this race and the issues in the race, not only the people.
You mentioned that net worth stat, $8 versus $247,000 for a black family and a white family. That seems to me on social media to be one of the things that is blowing people's minds nationally. So I can't believe this disparity.
And it's the Federal Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
That's
Greater Boston area, right? Not just Boston proper. Tanisha, let me go to you. When you guys put out this report sizing up Mayor Walsh's track record with community, the African-American community in Boston, you got, as I recall, some pretty sharp pushback from the mayor and City Hall. They questioned some of your findings. Do you see the work that Adrian and his colleagues are doing right now as vindication of a sort?
Well, the work of the NAACP Boston branch, specifically as it relates to the report card, was data-driven. And so although there was pushback and in some respects from the administration and others that called some of our data inaccurate, we always knew that it was accurate. That was the culmination of over 18 months of due diligence and hard research done by volunteers who are deeply committed to addressing the racial issues here in the city of Boston. So whether it's this particular spotlight or, in fact, I believe it was maybe a few days after the release of the report card, the Globe, the Banner, all of them, even NPR, had reports out that certainly supported the work of the NAACP Boston branch. So for us, it's about let's stop denying what we know exists, and let's get down to the business of addressing these very real racial inequities that exist in this city that we have the power to address.
Adrian, I have seen and heard complaints, and I'm sure you have as well, from people, white people, I haven't heard this from any African Americans, saying, oh, this story, Boston is a racist city. It's been done so many times before. Why do we need to hear it again?
Well,
look at the Boston Globe, because that paper is largely run by white people. What would you say to those two?
What I would say is this is an important series that we're very proud of. It's very important that the city get its arms around this issue. It is an issue that, contrary to people saying it's discussed too much, as Tanisha points out, it's discussed far too little and in far too little depth. And I hope that we'll be able to drive a discussion the city desperately needs to have about racial equity. Absolutely. And the idea that this is some tired subject and nobody's finding out anything new from this is ridiculous.
Do you think? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that is ridiculous. Because although there are some of the data is data that we've seen for years, like the disparities in net worth between black families and white families. Those disparities are real. They've been out there since 2015 was the Color of Wealth
yes, yep.
of the Color of Wealth study. So that's not new. But yet and still there there is a fresh perspective that we're seeing in this series that the Globe has produced, whether we're talking about the work that you did relative to housing discrimination here in the city of Boston, Akila's piece from yesterday that spoke to, in 2017, the experiences of Black people trying to find apartments here in the city.
Can I get either you or Adrian to just synopsize what Akila found? Because it was very interesting.
Yeah, so one of the people in yesterday's installment, one of the pieces of data that was put forth had to do with the experiences of people of color, specifically Black people in the city of Boston, trying to find housing. And they did, kind of the good old-fashioned study, Beat Street study, where, one person calls up asking about a particular apartment that's listed for rent, and
with a black sounding
with
name,
a black
right?
sounding name, whatever that is, and another person with a name that sounds more white. And lo and behold, what was found is that when the Black person called, the apartment's not available. When the white person calls, sure, come over. That's a very real problem, and one that we haven't talked a lot about in recent years. The other stat that was very striking for me in today's piece, Andrew Ryan's piece, has to do with construction jobs and opportunities. This stat around 1 hour of work for a Black construction worker equal to a day's worth of work for a white construction worker. We should all be startled by those stats.
The whole notion that we have built this entire new neighborhood in the city in the last 15 years, the Seaport, and that it is everything about it is white. Who lives there, who works there, who drives nails there, who serves meals there, who eats in restaurants there. It's mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. And the fact that nobody ever thought that this was a problem, the fact that $18 billion of public investment has made all of this possible, but city and state government didn't use any of that leverage to create a neighborhood that is welcoming and open to all Bostonians is stunning to me.
And I absolutely agree with Adrian. The most baffling stat that came out, I believe it was today, was 1, 2, 3 mortgages have been originated in the last decade for Black folks in that area.
For condos in the
Seaport. And so, and I think Adrian really hits it on the head here. This is where the mayor, the market, I believe, and also the media should have been looking as to how we could use that $18 billion to do what other cities have done. Municipalities should be leading in these areas of equity. They should be the guardrails and really the people who challenge the private sector based on our infusion of dollars to do the right thing. And I think we have missed out on that opportunity with the dollars that were infused into that neighborhood. And we need to learn, as Tanisha was saying, what do we do now? This can't only be, hey, we're going to have discussions and we're going to have dialogues. We need duologues. We need people to step forward and actually do something and put forward plans of action to move this forward.
In the case of the Seaport discrepancies that you've been talking about, what can be done now? Because all of a sudden, where there was nothing, 5, 10 years ago, here we go. It's almost all built up. So what could be done now moving forward to address either? Oh, go ahead.
It's not too late to build housing in the Seaport that isn't all $1 million condos. It's not too late to allow for greater income diversity in the Seaport.
And then to make them on site to build, this is the other component that the story actually brought up. The numbers of on-site affordable housing, and actually we need to, in Boston, denote what affordable is, but affordable
that rings
housing.
A bell for some reason.
Yeah, but also, but the issue is you're able to buy out of your covenant to do affordable, right? So you could say, you know what, I'm actually going to put some money in the kitty, and I'm actually not going to move.
The housing gets built. The question is where does it go?
Get built?
Right? It doesn't have to be in the Seaport. It can be
right.
And who built it?
Right. It is who built it, but I do agree with Adrian in that there is still a very real opportunity, not only in the Seaport, to ensure that it is reflective of the racial and ethnic diversity, the rich racial and ethnic diversity of this city. And whether we're talking about the businesses that have yet to be established in the Seaport, or we're talking about additional housing, the bottom line is we must be intentional about this work. And one of the other pieces that is very real, we found it in our report and the Globe found it in theirs, is that there seems to be a lack of intentionality on the part of those who are charged with the responsibility of doing this work. The BPDA, in fact, I think in the piece noted that they don't focus on these particular issues. And it is possible for us to do better. I also think that there are lessons to be learned from what's happening in the Seaport. All across this city, communities, neighborhoods are being revitalized, if not created. And so, again, we need to call for more intentionality when it comes to the planning of these neighborhoods.
Ultimately, that's down to elected officials, right? I mean, it would start in Boston proper with Mayor Walsh, and it would start elsewhere in the state with, I would assume, Governor Baker. Is that a fair assessment? Or
It's
no?
absolutely fair, because the mayor and the city of Boston, this is a strong mayor system and a weak city council system. And so when it comes to this real opportunity, it's when the mayor is actually having a conversation with a company, as happened in Atlanta, as happened in Washington, D.C., the mayors communicated what their values were and actually ensured that there will be diversity in the companies. So this is the other component. Not only workforce, but we want subcontractors and we want companies that are actually going to be building these facilities, because we know that that's actually how wealth is built.
No,
and
this is a huge point. This is not just about housing, and it's not even just about who works in the seaport.
That's right.
It's about the fact that billions of dollars of wealth are being created in this city that's on fire, and who's going to get those billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And it's about the fact that every boom in the city somehow misses the African-American community. And when is that going to be a priority, and what are we going to do about that? And when does that become part of the agenda?
I want to ask the three of you, and we have barely enough time left for me to even pose the question, but the series is just beginning, obviously. There would be much more to talk about if we were here in 2 days. I'm curious about the pieces so far. I've mentioned all sorts of very troubling metrics about the unemployment rate, black versus white being basically what it was in 1983. The net worth number that we talked about earlier. Also, and we had some video, we don't need to show it, people using Boston as a punchline to talk about the city being racist. In your experience, as you grew up here, you grew up in Brockton, you grew up in Miami, but you've been here for a couple days. Couple days.
Couple decades.
Couple decades. You've been here for
He's
a couple
a
decades.
Bostonian.
Forgive me. How has the sort of we've been talking about a lot of structural issues. Yeah. How has the personal experience of being an African American in the city changed in the time that you've been here?
Well, it's definitely changed in the time that I've been here. When I moved to Boston in 1989 to come work for the Globe, people told me, don't ever go to Charlestown, don't ever go to South Boston. You might not ever come back. It's not like that anymore. What is going on now is important, but it's more subtle.
Last word to you, Tanisha.
And for me, similar. I mean, my great-grandparents are from Boston, my grandparents are from Boston, my parents are from Boston. Things have certainly changed on the surface, but when we start to peel back the layers, unfortunately, what we're seeing is that those systems and those structures are still prevalent and still impacting people of color.
I lied. We have time for you to get the last word.
Well, I got votes in every single neighborhood in the city of Boston, and I'm very proud of that. One of the things that has actually changed is the reality for my friends in South Boston is closer to the reality of Roxbury. They're getting pushed out just like everybody else in the city of Boston. We have a lot of work to do. And we're Boston. We can actually do it. We're small enough, big enough, but significant enough to actually move the dial on these issues.
On that note, Tito Jackson, Tanisha Sullivan, Adrian Walker, who has been here for a couple decades. Thank you all for coming in, and congrats on the series.
Thank you.
Thank you.